My name is Sarah. I recently turned 30 and I've been married to Joey for a year and a half. When Joey, the man I've always wanted to marry, proposed, I was overjoyed. We both looked forward to building a lifetime of memories and supporting each other. In hindsight, those were truly happy times. The first signs of trouble in my marriage came about 3 months after we tied the knot. Out of the blue, I got a call from my mother-in-law, Grace, asking us to visit Joey's family home. Since Joey had wanted me to be a stay-at-home wife, I was mainly focused on household chores. Grace knew this, so when she called, I promptly said, "Sure, I'll be right over," and headed to Joey's family home. Upon arriving, Grace was waiting at the front door. "Hi, Grace," I greeted her, but unlike other times, she ignored me. Instead, she said, "Come, and quickly. There are various things I need you to do today," and ushered me into the living room. Grace, what do you need me to do?" Grace sat down and instructed. "The kitchen sink is full of breakfast and lunch dishes. Please wash them for me," pointing toward the kitchen with her chin. I was shocked and didn't know what to say. I had never been treated this way before. Grace, seeing my confusion, snapped, "What are you standing around for? Didn't you hear me? I said wash the dishes." Intimidated by Grace's unusual demeanor, I hastily replied, okay," and made my way to the kitchen. I stood in front of the sink, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would jump out of my chest. I had never seen this side of Grace before. Whenever Joey and I had visited in the past, she was much kinder and cheerful. So why now? The word harassment suddenly flashed across my mind. Could it be happening to me? Something I'd only ever seen in soap operas was happening to me in real life. The realization made my blood run cold. I couldn't afford to make Grace any angrier. With that thought, I quickly washed and put away the dishes. "Grace, I'm done with the dishes." With that, Grace replies, "All right, laundry's next. Then cleaning. Make sure you get all the way up to the stairs." She then lays back on the living room sofa and falls asleep. I'm left standing puzzled. I don't know where the cleaning supplies are or the specifics of how this household does laundry. I hesitantly ask, Grace?" She snaps, "Oh, for heaven's sake, I just told you what to do. You're my son's wife. Can't you handle this? My own daughter, who is younger than you, can do all this perfectly." She then falls back asleep. I'm stunned and stand frozen. Why am I being compared to my sister-in-law, Lily? Annoyed, I decide to just go ahead and do the cleaning and laundry. Apparently, my way wasn't to her liking. I had to redo the laundry and cleaning. Throughout, Grace would say things like, "If it were Lily, she would have gotten it right. Why can't you? You're unfit to be Joey's wife if you can't even manage household chores." How embarrassing. She keeps complaining. At that moment, it hits me why Grace has suddenly become so harsh. She's comparing me to her perfect daughter, Lily, and can't stand it. Lily is Joey's sister and my sister-in-law. She got married before us and lives with her in-laws, so we hardly ever see her. My impression of her from our wedding was that she's outgoing and easy to talk to. I can't say for sure since we haven't had a deep conversation about it, but both Grace and William, my father-in-law, seem pretty lenient with Lily. Even at our wedding, my father-in-law William said, "Look how cute Lily is in her party dress. She's stealing the spotlight from the bride." Grace agreed and Lily said, "Hey, that's rude to Sarah." Joey and I laughed it off, but it did hurt a bit. And so ever since Grace and William started comparing me to Lily, my impression of her has been getting worse and worse. 3 months into our marriage, I consulted Joey about the first instance of Grace's harassment. I told him, "Hey, I went to your parents' house today because Grace called me. I did the chores, but she kept comparing me to Lily and complaining. Can you say something to her?" Joey replied, "That doesn't sound like Mom, but okay, I'll talk to her." I was a bit irked by his tone, but hoped he'd handle it. Unfortunately, it only made Grace more severe with me, calling me over more often. Every time I'd be tasked with chores and even major shopping. At first, Joey would say, "All right, I'll tell Mom." But as time passed, he'd say again, maybe you're just too sensitive. Eventually, whenever I bring up Grace, he'd sigh and say, oh, look, maybe mom's just looking out for you. Why not take it a little more seriously? Can you believe it? We've only been married for about a year, and he's already taking his mom's side over me. I felt a sudden emptiness wash over me. Anger, sadness. I had moved past all those feelings and entered a state of utter indifference. Ever since then, when I visited Joey's parents' house with him, Grace started ordering me around like it was a given. Whether it was because she now believed Joey was on her side, she didn't hesitate to delegate all the household chores to me. Meanwhile, William, Grace, and Joey would all be having tea in the living room. Whenever we ran out of snacks, Grace would snark, Sarah, you're so inconsiderate. If you see it running low, bring some more. Even Joey chimed in, Sarah, more tea please, and make it stronger this time. He had started treating me just like Grace did. William wasn't any better treating me like a servant. Sarah, we're out of cigarettes. Go get some, he'd command. I wanted to scream, buy your own darn cigarettes. Joey, Grace, make your own tea and snacks. But what could I do? I was alone in changing my situation. Speaker 1. Seems impossible. Fast forward a year and a half into our marriage, I was once again at Joey's family home. These days, Grace would call me over on Joey's days off, and both of us were obligated to go. At this point, I was pregnant and had just entered my 3rd trimester. I felt less than stellar, and honestly, I didn't want to be at Joey's family home at all. After learning about the pregnancy, Grace seemed more enthusiastic, declaring, I have so many things to teach you as a mother-to-be. But in reality, she just had me doing housework for them, with neither Joey nor William lifting a finger to help. Doing as Grace ordered, I felt periodic stomach cramps and discomfort. Even cold sweat standing was becoming a struggle. Despite this, Grace and Lily did housework even when she was pregnant. You know, you're slacking off a bit, don't you think? Sure, my morning sickness might not have been severe, only some nausea and fatigue. But now, in my 3rd trimester, I felt way down, struggling just to stand. Hours later, while I was preparing dinner in the kitchen, a sharp pain suddenly hit my stomach and I crouched down. At that moment, the front door opened where home echoed a loud voice. From the living room, I heard Joey and William asking, Are you back? Where's Mom? It was clear that Lily had returned. Footsteps started to approach. Mom, what's for dinner today? Lily walked into the kitchen and was startled to see me hunched over in pain. What's going on? Sarah, are you okay? She hurried over to me. Sorry, my stomach's hurting a bit. Hearing this, Lily looked at my belly and asked awkwardly, Sarah, could you be pregnant? Didn't Joey tell you? I'm already 8 months along. I thought Joey had informed Lily, since he told me he would when I entered my stable trimester. Suddenly Lily started trembling. Her face turned bright red and she stormed out of the kitchen. Mom, where are you? Lily called out for Grace with a loud voice. Grace, likely having been napping upstairs, came down nonchalantly. Oh, Lily, welcome back. I've missed you. As Grace tried to hug her, Lily pushed her away. What? Lily? Confused. Grace got a cold response. Why is Sarah cooking alone, Mom? Especially when she's so visibly pregnant? Grace suddenly realized Lily wasn't on her side. Her face turned pale. Well, Sarah insisted on doing it. No way. Do you know how hard it is to be on your feet all day during the late stages of pregnancy? You've been pregnant. You should know. Lily yelled furiously. Grace was deeply shocked that her beloved daughter wasn't siding with her and slumped to the floor. Ignoring Grace, Lily headed to the living room. Picking up a newspaper, she hit Joey on the head and yelled, Who got Sarah pregnant while you sit here playing on your phone? Aren't you ashamed? What? Joey was too stunned to grasp the situation. Seriously, Sarah is being mistreated by Mom and you're oblivious. Are you dumb? As Lily lunged at Joey. William intervened. Lily calmed down. Don't talk to me about calming down, Dad. Remember when I brought my husband to meet you? You told him to prioritize and take care of me after we got married. What about this mess? Your son is playing games while his pregnant wife is left alone. William couldn't utter a word and just looked down, his face turning pale. Finally, Lily told all three, "Cool your heads, you inhumans," and kicked William, Grace, and Joey out of the house. The room had Joey's parents' house falls silent. Suddenly, Lily seems to remember I'm there. She turns around and says, "Oh, Sarah, I'm sorry for yelling. Did I scare the baby? Are you okay?" Her strong demeanor from moments ago instantly vanishes. I find her sudden change in mood so funny that I can't help but laugh. "What, Sarah? What's so funny? I'm really concerned here." "Yeah, sorry, I get it, Lily. Thanks for sticking up for me." When I actually say thank you, tears start to flow. All the pent-up emotions I've been holding back come rushing out to me who had felt so alone. Lily's words and actions meant the world. My impression of Lily starts to improve after this incident, seeing me cry. Lily apologizes profusely. She says she's sorry for not noticing anything wrong before, for her own mother's terrible behavior, and for her embarrassing brother. "I'm really sorry," she says. But of course, it's not Lily who should be apologizing. Grace for what she did, and William and Joey for turning a blind eye. They are also in the wrong. Even I am for not seeking help sooner, I assure Lily. "Don't worry, it's all good now." And we sit down to the dinner I'd prepared. Afterwards, Lily drives me home. A few hours later, a likely scolded Joey returns. He's completely changed his tune, saying, "Sarah, I'm really sorry about everything. It won't happen again." When I report this to Lily, she says, "That's good to hear. But if anything like this happens again, don't hesitate to divorce him." And I fully intend to. Grace and William visit our home later to formally apologize. "We were wrong. We're really sorry." From that point on, no more summons to Joey's family home and no more harassment from Grace. Joey also stopped suggesting we visit his family, allowing me to relax for the remainder of my pregnancy. All thanks to Lily. We've been in touch frequently since then, even having casual phone calls. We chat about this and that, feeling like real friends. Once things settle down after the baby is born, I plan to visit Joey's family again. When I tell Lily, she says, "Let me know when you're going. We'll plan a family visit too." It's so reassuring to have her from the bottom of my heart. I'm glad Lily is here. I think everything will be okay now with Grace. With Joey, I think we'll manage. And I owe this newfound confidence to Lily. If Lily ever needs help, I want to be the one to assist her. That's how I go through each day now.
You want a trip to the Caribbean in a sweepstakes? If so, Mommy and I are going. You're staying behind, got it? If not, we're getting divorced.
Andrew used the threat of divorce to steal the Caribbean trip from me. His mom looked at me with a smirk, gloating. I can't let this slide. I'll get my special revenge on this mother-son duo. My name is Lillian, 32 years old. I'm just your regular working mother at some company. Andrew and I have been married for 2 years. I met him, 2 years my senior, through a mutual acquaintance. Never really been into romance, didn't date at all during college. Had a couple of relationships after starting work, but none led to marriage. Next thing I knew, I was 30. My parents worried about me, asked around for potential matches. Andrew was calm, caring deeply for his parents. Since I hold my parents dear as well, I was drawn to his similar mindset. I thought maybe I could make it work with him. Decided to marry him. Everything went smoothly, and we became husband and wife. Celebrated by many, it was pure bliss. About 6 months into our marriage, I got a barrage of calls from Andrew. I called back in a hurry. Andrew, with a drained voice, said,
"Please stay calm. The thing is, Dad..."
Something happened to Alfred?
He collapsed at home and was taken to the hospital. And then...
No way. I never thought I'd hear about my father-in-law's death so soon. He was the picture of health. Not just me, everyone was in shock. After that, Andrew became overly considerate of his now alone mom. He would visit her daily, having dinner or shopping together. Even took special leave once to go on a trip with her. It's not that he neglects me, but whenever our plans clash, he always chooses her.
Sorry, Lillian. Mom just called and wants me to come over.
But we were going to see a movie today.
She really wants to go shopping.
We planned this a week ago, and still?
Don't be like this. She's feeling lonely. You can go to the movie alone, can't you?
Fine. I said okay, but inside I was fuming. Why am I the one getting blamed? Isn't Matilda the demanding one? No matter his reasons for being considerate of his lonely mother-in-law, it's clear he's a mama's boy. However, aside from this issue with his mom, our marriage was okay. I assumed that this is just what marriage is like. My personal escape? Solving crossword puzzles with prizes. They were perfect for when Andrew ditched me for Matilda, and sometimes I'd win gift cards or assorted food items. One day, I actually won a pair of tickets to the Caribbean. It was the biggest prize I'd ever won. I double-checked the win multiple times out of sheer excitement. The tickets required you to specify who would be traveling before contacting the airline. I thought hard about who'd I take. Of course, the first person that came to mind was Andrew, but I had my reservations. Andrew often traveled with Matilda, and if I suggested traveling together, I had a feeling she might want to tag along. After much consideration, I decided to gift the trip to my parents. On my way home, I dropped by my parents' house and broke the news to Mom. Mom, guess what? I won tickets to the Caribbean. Oh my, that's amazing. You're going with Andrew, right? Have fun. Not exactly. I thought I'd give them to you and Dad. To us? Are you sure? Absolutely. Andrew travels enough. I want you two to enjoy this. Oh, thank you, Lillian. We'll definitely take you up on that. Mom grinned with excitement. Dad, however, seemed pensive. Dad, he looked troubled.
Well, I've got work.
Can't you take some leave?
This time of the year is busy for our company. It's not really the best time for me to be away.
Oh, that's too bad. Then he suggested,
Why not go with Olivia?
Me?
It was originally your prize, right? Go enjoy some quality time with her.
Mom chimed in excitedly. That sounds wonderful. I felt elated and increasingly excited. The next day, I applied for leave, and it was quickly approved. I quickly contacted the airline and informed them that my mom and I would be using the tickets. On my way home from work, I stopped by a bookstore and bought a guidebook for the Caribbean trip. It had been ages since Mom and I had gone on a trip together. I was honestly thrilled, but when I got home, an unexpected sight awaited me. I'm home. Huh? Seeing the lights on, I naturally assumed Andrew was home. But instead of his shoes at the entrance, there were a familiar pair of women's shoes. As I pondered, the living room door opened, revealing Matilda.
Lillian, what time do you think it is?
Oh, Matilda, didn't realize you were here.
It's not just about being here. Coming home this late, what have you been doing? Andrew will be back any minute now.
I'm sorry, I'll get dinner ready right away.
It's not just about that, is it? Making the bed is just basic common sense for a daughter-in-law. Do you even take your role seriously?
I'm sorry?
Things have gotten this way because you're still working. You should be more dedicated to your home.
Matilda huffed and strutted back to the living room. Given that she lived nearby and Andrew had given her a key, she often dropped by without notice.
A daughter-in-law is supposed to serve her husband and this family.
With such archaic beliefs, she clearly disapproved of me working full-time. She would constantly nitpick and criticize, making it impossible for me to warm up to her. As I set my bags down and started preparing dinner, Matilda suddenly shrieked.
Wait, what's this? Lillian, are you planning to go to the Caribbean?
Huh? She had rummaged through my bag and found the newly bought guidebook. Matilda, why are you going through my things?
That's not the point. What's this about going to the Caribbean?
I won the trip in a sweepstake. I was planning to gift it to Mom.
I've heard nothing about this.
Why would I need to? Our spat was interrupted by Andrew's arrival. Matilda rushed to him, pointing at me accusingly.
Andrew, listen to this. Lillian's been so inconsiderate.
What happened, Mom? Did Lillian do something?
You believe she won a Caribbean trip and planned to give it to Olivia without even consulting me?
What? Caribbean trip? This is news to me, too.
Andrew glared at me, demanding,
What's going on?
It's simple. I won the trip and thought of gifting it to my parents, but since Dad can't go...
So you're going with Olivia?
Yes? What's the big deal? You always travel with Matilda.
It's not the same. Me and Mom only go on domestic trips. We haven't been abroad in years. How can you decide this without consulting me?
It's my prize. Why should I? Andrew slammed the table, cutting me off.
You're getting too bold for a daughter-in-law. Me and Mommy are going. You'll stay home.
Mommy. I couldn't hide my distaste at Andrew's childish word choice. Hold on, this trip, you see...
Enough. If you're not happy, let's divorce.
What? Divorce? I couldn't believe my ears. Threatening divorce over something like this? Angry, I retorted, I won this trip fair and square. I've already decided to gift it to my own mom.
Just pick up on the vibes for once. Mommy wants to go.
Where does it end with prioritizing Matilda? You never consider how I feel.
I don't care how you feel. As I said, this trip is for me and Mommy. Stay home and be good.
I felt my affection for Andrew rapidly cooling. To him, I was clearly lower than Matilda. I couldn't keep dealing with this ridiculous mother-son duo. Calmly, I told Andrew, Fine, do as you wish. Enjoy your trip.
Humph, you should have listened from the start.
Suit yourself.
Always talking back.
The kind Andrew I knew was nowhere to be found. And there was Matilda, smirking triumphantly. I decided to leave this house while they were on the trip. I resolved to let Andrew and Matilda take the trip this time. The next day, I contacted the airline to notify them of the change in participants to Andrew and mother-in-law. However, the operator replied with a concerned tone,
I'm sorry, but we cannot change the registered participants once they've been confirmed.
Is that so?
Yes. Moreover, this airline ticket requires the actual winner to accompany. So, if it's your husband and mother-in-law, the ticket itself will become invalid.
So, if I don't go, the ticket has no purpose, right?
That's correct. Please review the documents we sent you for this specific condition.
Upon checking the documents I received, it clearly stated, only the winner has the right to use the ticket, and it cannot be transferred. I explained the situation to the operator and decided to decline the trip. Without notifying Andrew and Matilda, I made plans to let them travel at their own expense. That night, when I returned home from work, I casually mentioned it to Andrew. Andrew, about the Caribbean trip.
Yeah, you contacted the airline, right? Saying that Mommy and I will go?
I did call. Here are the winning documents and the tickets.
I only need the tickets. I won't read the documents.
There are detailed instructions in those documents. Considering it's an international trip, I think it would be wise to read them.
I don't need to. Mommy and I know what we're doing. We're efficient, not like you.
Fine, whatever. I'll leave them here just in case. As I had expected, Andrew didn't bother to read the documents and proceeded to the day of the trip. After confirming Andrew had left, I packed my bags and headed to my parents' house. While I was unpacking, as anticipated, I received a call from Andrew. As soon as I picked up, he started shouting,
Hey, what's the meaning of this? They said this ticket can't be used.
That's right. If the winner doesn't go, the ticket is invalid.
What? Why didn't you tell me something so crucial earlier?
I did tell you. Remember, it might be a good idea to read the instructions.
You mean it was written in those documents you gave me?
Exactly. It's your fault for not reading.
This is absurd. So how are we supposed to get to the Caribbean?
Well, the operator did mention if the winner is not accompanying, you'd have to pay the full price.
The full price?
Clearly not expecting this turn of events, Andrew sounded panicked. I could hear Matilda's voice in the background, indicating they were both in distress.
Andrew, what did Lillian say?
Mommy, if Lillian doesn't have to pay for the trip.
What? Let me talk to her.
I can't deal with this anymore. They can figure it out on their own. After silently hanging up, it was only a few minutes before Andrew called back. Hello, what is it now? I'm busy.
It's not what is it. I tried to buy the tickets, but the credit card isn't working.
Huh? I don't know anything about your card.
It's not mine, it's your card.
Oh, so you're saying you used my card without my permission?
Just fix it now.
When I checked my wallet this morning, my card was missing. I had a hunch it immediately froze it. I knew you stole it.
Are you kidding me? I was planning to shop with that card abroad. Always messing things up, you jerk. You freaking witch.
He showed no remorse for taking the trip or for stealing the card. This guy always putting himself first. I can't handle him anymore. Feeling this way, I coldly told him off. A jerk? Who are you calling that? After mocking others all the time, you should just go to hell.
What? Who are you talking to like that?
Who do you think? Calling out for Mommy is honestly creepy. If you love Mommy so much, why don't you two just stay together? I can't handle you, a mama's boy. There's no value in us being married.
Hey, calm down. If you keep this up, we'll divorce.
Fine by me. I was thinking the same thing. I've left the house and don't plan to come back. Enjoy your time abroad with your beloved Mommy. Hope you both drown in the Caribbean. Damn mama's boy. In a rage, I hung up and blocked both Andrew and his mother. After that, I visited a law firm my father recommended and started the divorce process. When I checked our savings for asset division, I realized our joint account had been emptied. There were multiple withdrawals, all lining up with when Andrew went on a trip with his mother. It was clear he used it for his travels with her. Plus, he had used my credit card without permission. I demanded a large compensation. He ended up in debt and seemed to be chased by creditors. The once spoiled mother, now restricted by our actions, saw her relationship with Andrew sour, arguing every time they met. Considering how he used to act, it's ironic. Meanwhile, I decided to stay with my parents for a time. I've been a worry, so I want to make it up to them by living together and taking care of them. Honestly, I'm done with marriage. What's truly valuable is a caring family. This whole divorce ordeal made me realize that again.
We're protecting your daughter.
I received a sudden phone call from the police one afternoon. Why would the police call me? What on earth happened? Listening to them, I was utterly shocked by what they had to say. What do you mean? Turns out the police had found my 4-year-old daughter alone and took her under their care. But she was supposed to be at the amusement park with my husband. Little did I know, this call would mark a drastic turning point in our lives. I'm Karen, I'm 30 years old, and I work from home while raising my daughter. I married my college classmate Andrew 5 years ago, and we have a 4-year-old daughter named Jennifer. My husband is super involved in childcare. He even takes our daughter out on his days off. He's also on the verge of a big promotion, so things are going great for us both personally and professionally. Thanks to my amazing husband and adorable daughter, life has been pretty wonderful. That was until I received that fateful call.
We're going to the amusement park today.
Oh, thank you. That day was a Saturday, and my husband, who was off work, took our daughter to the amusement park. I was supposed to go with him, but a last-minute important work task came up, so I had to bail. Our daughter was looking forward to the park and kept urging my husband to hurry.
Haha, Jennifer is so impatient. Well, we're off.
Have a great time. Watching the two of them holding hands as they headed to the car, I couldn't help but smile. All right, that's nail work today. I feel like it's going to be a good day. I stretched a bit and retreated to my home office. 2 hours later, as I was about to take a short break, I realized my phone was ringing. It was lunchtime, so I thought maybe it's from my husband, but the caller ID showed an unknown number. On edge, I picked up the phone, only to find out the caller was the police. And they were saying they had found my daughter alone. There's no way she'd be alone. She was supposed to be at the amusement park with my husband. Thinking it was a prank, I decided to double check with my husband. Hello, there's something I'd like to ask you.
What's up?
Where are you and Jennifer right now?
Huh? We're at the amusement park.
My husband answered nonchalantly over the phone. The police just called me, saying they found Jennifer. What's going on?
What? Well, she's laughing next to me.
My husband seemed a bit rattled by my words. As long as you're together, that's fine.
She's right next to me, of course.
I guess it was a prank call then. Can you put Jennifer on? I was tired from work and just wanted to hear my daughter's voice.
No, she says she's too embarrassed.
Really? Our daughter loves to play phone games every day and even calls us when we're out. There's no way she'd be embarrassed. My trust in my husband wavered at his words. Are you sure? It sounds like something Jennifer would offer to do.
Look, maybe Jennifer's tired too. Can we drop it now?
My suspicion grew as my husband hastily tried to end the call. Suddenly, I noticed something odd. Wait, it's unusually quiet. There was no sound of laughter or amusement park rides in the background. It was eerily silent. He claims they were at the amusement park, but could that be true?
I'll see you at home then.
And with that, he hung up. I couldn't help but ponder at my husband's odd behavior. Something's not right. Doubting my husband's words and the silence, I checked something. The GPS on my daughter's phone. I had completely forgotten about it in my confusion with the police call. But but it shows they are at the amusement park. The GPS confirms they were at the amusement park where both my daughter and husband were supposed to be. But a call from the police? That's strange. Worried but also suspicious, I decided to head over to the amusement park. When I got to the Lost and Found Center, sure enough, there she was, my daughter. She seemed to be chatting happily with the police officer, but as soon as she saw me, she burst into tears.
Dad said he'd wait for me on a bench and that I could go on any ride I wanted. I was playing, and then when I looked around, he was nowhere to be found.
I asked the staff for details. They had found my daughter wandering alone in the park. They had made several announcements calling for her guardians, but when no one showed up, they contacted the police. Luckily, she had a tag with her address and my contact details, so they were able to get in touch with me quickly. Where could he be? What's he doing? My husband isn't the type to abandon our 4-year-old daughter like this. Could he be in some sort of trouble? I shake off the unsettling thought.
Mom, I took lots of pictures.
To calm her down, we went to a restaurant and ordered a sundae after leaving the Lost and Found Center. While enjoying her ice cream, she handed me her toy camera. It was a special one that my father bought for her last month for her birthday. Even though it's a toy, it can actually take photos. I wonder what pictures she took. I turned the camera on and started going through the pictures. You've got to be kidding me! There it was. A photo of my husband hugging an unfamiliar woman. More photos of the same kind appeared, making me feel sick to my stomach. Jennifer, who is this woman?
She's a friend of Dad's,
she said. I felt as if everything went dark for a moment. I remembered he cheated on me once before when I was pregnant 5 years ago. We reconciled because we had a child on the way. And now he's doing it again? And using our precious daughter to cover it up? He probably left her here to go off with his mistress. Do you know where Dad went, Jennifer? She shook her head no in response to my question. Then she started crying again. As I comforted her, she told me that Dad had forcefully pushed her away, saying, "You're big enough to play by yourself now." I'm so sorry you had to go through this, sweetie. I took my daughter's hand and we headed home. Late one night, my husband rushes through the door, looking panicked. Where have you been and what have you been doing? He picks up on the anger in my voice and looks tense. Actually, Jennifer went missing. You said she was fine on the phone. Why did you lie? I didn't lie. I just thought we'd find her quickly. It's been over 6 hours since that phone call. He's probably been out with his mistress. It's clear he's lying. Don't you think it's odd you didn't notice the park announcements? How do you know about that? The police called me. When I went to pick up Jennifer at the amusement park, the staff told me. He falls silent, looking uncomfortable. Of course he has nothing to say. He wasn't there. Leaving our daughter at an amusement park to be with his mistress is unforgivable. I've made up my mind to get back at him. Fine, just don't do it again. Oh, okay. He looks relieved. I decide to let him think he's off the hook, for now. Meanwhile, I've been up to something. A month later, I'm in Los Angeles. Not for a vacation or work, but to catch my husband red-handed with his mistress. Having a good time on your trip with your mistress? As they walk hand in hand, they both slowly turn around and show faces of utter shock. You can't talk your way out of this.
Karen, what are you doing here?
Weren't you supposed to be on a business trip today?
That's not it. She's a colleague from work.
Oh, really? I called your office. They confirmed you took the day off. He looks rattled, his eyes darting around as if confessing his own lie.
How did you even find out I was here?
Remember the GPS on Jennifer's phone? I put it in your car. I show him my phone screen. It clearly displays the location of a car parked nearby.
What? Using a hidden camera is so underhanded.
Who's the underhanded one here? The only reason you'd be worried is if you had something to hide. Or is this you finally admitting it?
That's not it.
The husband is furious, practically spitting as he talks. He cheats and yet blames me. I'm speechless.
Do you even have proof that I cheated?
Well, about that.
See, you don't.
Just as he smirks at me, thinking he's won, I shove a photo in his face.
What is this?
Look familiar?
This is from when we went to the amusement park. But how do you have this picture? You were supposed to be working.
Jennifer took it. Her toy camera actually works, you know.
You've got to be kidding me.
He stands there, speechless for a moment, then snorts dismissively.
This isn't even me. Did you mix me up with someone else?
To counter his attempt to weasel out, I hand him a large number of photos. There are so many of them that they seem to overflow from his hands. I'll admit the toy camera doesn't take the clearest photos, so I took these myself to make sure. His face turns pale as he sees the photos clearly showing him with his lover. How could you be all lovey-dovey with her right in front of our daughter? You're despicable.
If I tear these up...
He begins to tear up the photos, but that was expected. Too bad, these are all copies. I've got the original stored safely.
Damn you!
Angrily glaring at me, he looks defeated, but I decide to deal another blow. You've got a big promotion coming up at work, don't you?
What's your point?
How do you think spreading these photos would affect that?
What?
His face gradually turns paler. His company values character when considering promotions. If word got out about the affair, it could ruin his chances.
Please, don't do this.
Do you really think I'll forgive you now?
I've been a good husband all this time, haven't I? Can't you forgive me for that?
A good husband wouldn't leave his daughter at an amusement park. At my loud retort, my husband visibly shrinks back.
But I've been taking our daughter out every week lately, haven't I?
That was just to keep me off your scent about your affair.
I'm really sorry. Just please don't tell my work.
Looking at his almost tearful face, I feel no love for him anymore. Do you remember? When you cheated on me 5 years ago while I was pregnant? His face tenses, sweat forming on his forehead. I haven't forgotten the agreement we signed. I had made him sign a contract stating, if you cheat again, all your assets and custody rights go to me.
No, this isn't what it looks like. It's not an affair.
Then what is it? He falls silent, starting to cry. Pathetic. Then go ahead and sign this.
What is this?
I hand him divorce papers.
No, I don't want to break up. Who will take care of things at home if you're gone?
Staying together now is impossible.
Fine, I promise. No more affairs.
He screams, eyes bloodshot, but it doesn't reach my heart. I'm not angry about the affair anymore.
What? So you're forgiving me?
No, What I'm angry about is you putting our daughter in danger." My husband went silent, tears streaming down his face. "And another thing, you don't have a place in anyone's life anymore."
What? What do you mean?
"While you were gone, I told your parents, your coworkers, and everyone in your usual hangouts about what you've done. Everyone knows now." Hearing this, my husband buried his face in his hands in despair. "I don't even want to see your face, so make sure you fill this out." My husband looked up at me. His face was a mess of tears and snot, just like a child's. I left him there and walked away. A month later, the news got to his company, and they revoked his promotion. Because of the agreement we had, he had to give up his assets, with an additional $20,000 in damages and $400 a month in child support. He's barely making ends meet. He had to change jobs to a company with a terrible work environment just to earn a higher salary, and now he's working non-stop. I've moved back to my parents' home with our daughter and am doing my best as a single mom. Next year, my daughter will start preschool, and I'm looking forward to seeing her grow anew.
My story begins about 6 years ago. I was a frequent and dedicated customer of a locally owned smoke and vape shop in my hometown. The owner heard me say I was looking and offered me a job. It will have to be under the table, and I can't pay more than $10 an hour. I was just happy to be out of the house and seeing someone other than the kids and family. So the owner spent a day training me, gave me her cell number and door keys, then told me to call if I had any questions. That was it. Not other info besides, call me if you need pricing. It was kind of a sink or swim thing. They then started another business in another state. My shop was in California, and they opened another biz on the other side of the country. I went from Friday and Saturday to full-time. I went 2 months without being paid because they just never came home. I finally told them, look, I am basically running the place alone. I can do all the ordering and whatnot, send you it for approval, and then you can just stay there and pay me via Zelle. They said yes to all of it, except for the pay part. Instead, they would have their family friend, T, check the books and receipts, then check my hours, then pay me up to that date, every 2 weeks. T got paid quite handsomely, but also took whatever she pleased from the shop too. I took note of everything she took, how long she was there, and sent all of it to the owner, Lisa. T did not like that, because it was all taken out of her pay, so she started being busy and not showing up to pay me when she was supposed to. Instead of every 2 weeks, it was every month or every 5 or 6 weeks, and I had to text my boss to beg for an advance of pay to get gas. So, from 2 days a week to 7 days a week with 10 hours days. Lisa and her hub refused to pay for expensive software, so I did all the supply lists, ordering, and tax stuff on my Google Drive, and sent the info they wanted by email. Eventually, I began to get calls that I had the wrong music playing on the stereo. I played reggae, and she wanted hardcore rap. That she wanted that or this customer outie now, which I generally ignored because they were paying customers after all, or things like that. I began updating and improving the shop at their request, all on my own dime that they swore to reimburse, which brought in a bunch of customers and new stock. Our CBD section and customer base bloomed. Our vape section went from 2 shelves to an entire wall, and people from other cities came to our shop because I could repair almost anything that was broken. Our water tobacco pipes area became huge, with hand-blown glass pieces from famous and very well-known artists on sale. From my connections, they got them hella cheap and boosted that price 400% to sell them. Basically, I took a small town, rinky-dink vape and smoke shop and make it hugely successful, very profitable, and well-known across the state. All this time I was told I would be getting a percentage of the profits, and that I was family. And they always treat family well. With profit sharing being done at Christmas. Christmas comes, and I am told, our other biz is doing bad. Can we pay you the percent in 6 months? I agreed. More the idiot. COVID happened, but we kept our heads above water, becoming listed as a necessary business. I pointed out their business license still listed them as selling food and snacks, even though they didn't. So we stayed open. All the other shops cut their hours or closed, but we were pulling in cash like never before. Tea was still coming sporadically, and I was working my ass off, but since I loved the shop and my customers, I tolerated it. But as I was massively overworked, I eventually paid for it. I was admitted into the hospital for 2 weeks for exhaustion and a heart condition that the exhaustion made worse. The whole time I was in there, my boss kept calling and making me prove I was in the hospital. I had calls constantly from T, who filled in. And just in general, Lisa was pissy as hell I was in the hospital and not her shop. I get out and back in the shop, and she asked me to work on a huge project for her. Scan 5 years' worth of register receipts, enter the daily totals for all 5 years into a spreadsheet separated by year, cash, credit, CBD cash, CBD credit report, total bank deposit, hours worked, discounts given, etc. Took me 3 weeks to do it all. Saved to my Google Drive, then emailed to Lisa. Never thought about it again. She calls me, frantic because the accountant said it looked like we made way too much during COVID. I told Lisa that we had been the only shop open. That was the difference. She demanded I resend the spreadsheets, but only the part for that year, 2020. I do. Then, out of nowhere, she fires me, sends in tea with T's daughter, my replacement, and tells me to pack up and leave. No final pay, no reimbursement for the profit sharing. Nothing. I called Lisa and she tells me something that pisses me off to this day. You are bringing in the wrong kind of PU ball. I did work that hard to update and open that place for you to fill it with F slur for LGBTQ and N-word. That is it. And that she would settle up my last pay later. She did. I was pissed. I left. I am a lesbian. She knew that. When our store was at its worst during COVID, the LGBT community came together and supported the shop because I was there and we all helped one another. Our biggest and best paying customers were LGBTQ. So, I let all of them know what was said. I also told a few well-placed people about what Lisa had said during our phone call. I also had numerous texts where she had screen capped the security feed and pointed out people to run off, who strangely had all been POC. I also told the leader of the local LGBTQ association and the Chamber of Commerce leaders what had been said and showed my proof. As they were former customers of mine, they were appalled and spread it far and wide, utterly destroying their customer base. A month after firing me, she called, apologizing for the firing and making up excuses for not paying me, then asking where I had saved that spreadsheet. I told her that it was all on my Google Drive. She said if I sent it to the accountant again, she would settle up. Just don't send her 2020. She already has that one. So, after making my life miserable for years, putting me in the hospital, and then firing me just to PAT's DAGGER $5 and AK or more. Yeah, I am taking my revenge. She gave me the number of her accountant so that I could make sure the info got to her. I called N's accountant and asked her, can you send me what you do have? I don't want you to have to go through duplicate documents if you don't have to. See, I knew that Lisa had been tweaking numbers and figures so that her other biz, medical marijuana, could funnel through the store and be seen as legit. See, if you sell medical marijuana, you couldn't really put it into a normal bank, because if the feds wanted to, they could seize it because it is still FEDRALLY illegal, and banks are under federal rules. You had to prove that the money didn't come from selling MedMG to get it back, which could take years. There are banks that deal solely with people in the marijuana business, but even the cheapest account at the cheapest institution had a $1,000 a month flat fee. This was back in 2020 though. Maybe it's different now. My boss was not one to pay money like that just for a bank account, so she was laundering it through the store. Her accountant thought the numbers were suspicious, but had no proof. Until now. I was sent all the spreadsheets that Lisa had sent her, and was she in trouble? She was claiming that our little store was making over $10 a day more than we really were. And it all started happening in, you guessed it, 2020. So I accidentally sent her the real spreadsheets for 2020, with all the scanned receipts and the credit reports scans and the bank deposit scans. All the info needed to really blast Lisa into the stratosphere. The accountant called and asked me, "Are these all real? Are you sure these are the right figures?" I said, "Yep." All she needed to do was click on the day, and it hyperlinked you to all that day's info. Register receipt for the day, the square breakdown for the CBD sold that day, and the bank deposit and credit report receipts. I told her that these were the fully updated and accurate info for that year. I remember the accountant sounded stunned. She disliked my boss as much as I did for her lies, late payments, and utter contempt she treated her with. I emailed Lisa and told her all the info was sent, and that I was waiting for the payment as promised. Surprise, surprise, she blocked me, and no payment went through. As I was paid under the table, it was as she said. She and her husband and her best friend and her new worker said. So it was the least I could do to take her and her lying ass down. I also looked up the IRS tips email and sent them copies of the real and altered files along with a copy of their business licenses. They would ask me to text them copies of them and their tobacco license, and then also called code enforcement and let them know that their fire alarm system didn't work, that they had no emergency exit, and their extinguisher has been serviced in 4 years. They just sent a friend to fake it. I turned them into the FDA website for selling to underage customers. The new cashier was selling to underage all the time. And then sent in an anon tip that they were selling carts and wax they had made at their new business on the East Coast and were selling out of the shop. The fallout was glorious. They were shut down by code enforcement and the fire department for having black mold on the walls. Due to leaks they refused to fix, exposed wiring, no up-to-date servicing on the fire alarm system, and the fire extinguisher was inoperable. They were shopped by the FDA and had to pay some pricey fines for 3 different underage sales and had their tobacco license pulled. Right now, the IRS is doing a complete audit of the last 10 years of the store's taxes, and they shut the store's doors for good about 2 months ago. The bad part, I never got to hear what happened to their East Coast medical marijuana business. Huh. Oh well. Them's the breaks, I guess. Edit. People are commenting on doormat and sue for wages/turn into the labor board. As to the doormat, yeah. When I started there, I was in a mentally and verbally abusive relationship. I kicked them out my last year there, and also discovered my backbone. That is when I started asking questions about my pay and such. As to the labor board and suing, I was receiving food stamps, but reporting all my income as self-employed income. I was told that it was illegal to do that, and thinking about talking to a lawyer about it all, as I have all the texts with my hours and pay for my former boss saved on my old phone. UPDATE. So, I have returned from the smokiest corners of the Central Valley to post a wee update on what has been going on. As for T, I finally settled my paybacks for her. She was the manager of a red shirt wearing crafts supply shop. Her husband and Lisa's husband had an agreement that T's husband, would take all those East Coast stamped THC carts, waxes, and flour and sell them at unlicensed sessions. T would often get off work and go help her husband man the booth. Then the two of them kept 50% of the money and sent the rest back to Lisa and her husband. Well, A friend of mine happened to see them at a sesh, took a pic of them, and sent it to me. Can you believe that T was still wearing her work shirt and name tag? She must have just gotten there, I guess. Anyways, friends sent me multiple photos, with the product they were selling was clearly THC items, with pics of her handing items and taking cash from people. We did make sure to blur out everyone but her and her husband's faces, just to be safe. I opened a new email account and sent those photos to Red Shirt Crafts, store employment and contact us sites. Gave them her name, store location, and the days she had been working at that session. 2 weeks later, Grapevine said that she had been fired for being in uniform while selling illegal unlicensed THC. How sad. I finally got the settlement or payoff from the IRS for the tip I sent them. It felt dirty. Like the money just didn't feel gainfully acquired. So my friend and I took some and purchased what we needed to try and start up our own biz, paid off some bills, and donated a hefty amount to the local LGBTQ+ center and a gang intervention group. They do some amazing work out here for kids to get them and keep them out of gangs. The shop was finally sold off. The new owner is a man who owns a few other smoke shops in town, who Lisa had a visceral hatred for, because she is racist, yeah no. But his was the best offer, so they grabbed it like a drowning man grabs a flotation device. Since the sale, word spread that it had truly changed owners, and business doubled within the first month. He isn't getting near the same members I got, but then I'm not there, and he runs things way differently than I did. Grapevine also told me Lisa was considering suing him, thinking he was the reason her shop tanked, so he could buy the shop and location cheaper, but was dissuaded by her lawyer. Ha, ha. As for my friend and I starting our own business, sigh. The biz never ended up taking off. We gave it a good shot, but food carts are an overly saturated market here. We still do fundraising and catering with it, though, so it wasn't a complete waste. We bill ourselves as dinner and a show, and make fusion cuisine like chicken shawarma burritos with mjadara and hummus, vegetarian teriyaki, or chili bean-filled onigiri. Stuff like that. Sounds strange, but this is a uni town, and it is pretty popular. Just not popular enough to justify a storefront, or even a food cart. We would play 80s and 90s music and sing and dance while cooking, tell jokes and stories. It was a blast. Ah well, fun while it lasted. But things are quiet now. Lisa's entire family moved back to where their East Coast operation is. Not doing too well now, and they got in trouble when it was shown that their East Coast only products were being sold out west. Fines galore. To the point, they had to sell off their Cali property to cover them all. T and her husband Jay moved there with them, and I heard they are working with Lisa's husband in their grow operation. Lol at that. So, got my revenge, did some good to balance my karma, and had fun doing it. The end.
Next story.
Ronnie was a serial cheater throughout high school, but he was more than that. He was manipulative. He would blow through relationships, typically 4 at a time. They would only ever last a week to a couple months before the girls would catch him cheating. He'd proceed to leak their nudes or spill their secrets and move on to a new demographic of women. He was charismatic and scapegoated his problems onto his dying father. It didn't matter anyhow. He would destroy the victim's reputation until they weren't trusted anyways. Despite this, I was in love. I was his side piece through it all. Morally, I knew it was wrong, but I had never been in love before. Besides, he wasn't lying to me like the other girls. He was honest about the fact he was cheating. I was special. I stuck it out. 2 years later, and he's fallen in love with me too. Or so I thought. He vowed to give up cheating, even gave up porn just to have me love him back. I accepted it. We planned to marry. He was always so smart about his manipulation. When friends blocked me randomly or called me abusive, I thought it was just a misunderstanding. When people began to become aware of deep personal secrets, I thought maybe I had slipped up during a conversation. No one ever told me Ronnie had called me abusive, a cheater, or a liar. I never knew he accused me of being the things he secretly was. He would insult me late at night, before bed, and then claim he didn't remember in the morning. He would slip sly comments into our talks, just enough to make me doubt myself but never question him. He was a master at gaslighting until I hated myself and only wanted to please him. I was head over heels in love, despite all of it. He would casually slap me, never when I was upset, but when I said things he didn't like. He would slap me across the face, and I would be too shocked to speak. He followed it up by laughing and playing it off as okay to do, or a joke, so I wouldn't fight back. If I expressed it was wrong or told anyone, he said I was misunderstanding a playful tap. Halfway through our relationship, I followed work to another state and maintained a LDR with him. It was my dream. I wanted so badly to stay. But after 8 months, I gave up my home, my pets and my job to move 1,000 miles across the country to live with him again. I had literally nothing and was absolutely penniless. 3 months after this, I caught him cheating. He had asked a girl on a date via an alt Twitter account. I was hurt, but ultimately it wasn't so bad, so I forgave him. The seed of doubt was already planted, however. 2 months later, I snooped through his phone and noticed he had several Reddit accounts saved to Chrome. I vaguely recalled he used Reddit to view porn before, and I got a bad feeling in my stomach. I began guessing his common email/password combos. I got 5 hits total. They were more than I expected. I figured maybe he was lying about not watching porn, which is not a big deal to me. But for 6 months, he had been using these accounts to cheat on me using hookup and porn subreddits. I confronted him. He screamed, telling me he had already apologized to me for cheating a few months ago, and I needed to quit making him sad. That he had already said sorry, and I wasn't going to get anything else. He explained that he had continued to cheat because he feared I would leave, and he wanted a second option. I spent a week and a half sobbing. I had nothing but this man, and I had never been good enough for him. I was destroyed. He screamed at me nearly every day, telling me my crying was annoying, that my depression made him uncomfortable, telling my friends I was guilt-tripping him over something that didn't happen. Finally, I snapped. I had wasted all of my high school and early adult years with a man who did nothing but walk on me. I went back to Reddit and counted every person he had flirted with or exchanged messages with. I began to voice record every conversation, screenshot every text. Next, I downloaded Tinder and Bumble. For every girl he cheated on me with, I fucked a guy behind his back. When we went out with friends, I began to act more and more sad and slowly dropped in conversation how Ronnie had been yelling at me the night before and that it had upset me. I began to vent to his friends and show them every screenshot. Then I emailed his mother, his grandparents, and his work voice recordings of him screaming at me. I asked his boss if his company supported domestic violence. I cried to his mother, and she held me as I vented my frustrations, explaining how she had been cheated on by Ronnie's father. Ronnie began to scapegoat again. He told me he was sick in the head and his depression was causing him to act like that. I knew he was attempting to gaslight me. When we were young, I was so in love with him that I saved almost every photo and text he had sent me to a OneDrive. I found all the times he had admitted to leaking nudes, cheating and ruining girls' lives. I got in contact with each of the girls, making one big group chat and sending them every bit of evidence I could find. These were then posted all over Facebook. He had dreams of getting into politics. I joined every political group in our area and pretended to be interested in joining. I befriended the members and casually dropped into conversation how Ronnie had cheated on me and verbally abused me and ruined other people's lives. They would inquire more. I would vent and show them the mountain of evidence I had collected. Ronnie was still unaware I had done it. He spent the night screaming and crying about how no one liked him, and he wasn't sure why. He had lost his job. His friends and family wouldn't speak to him. He was being publicly shamed on social media, and his political group had ousted him. I finally dropped it onto him that I had done it, and I was leaving. During all this, I had secretly removed what little money I had from his bank account and contacted distant relatives and asked for a place to stay. I was leaving. He didn't have anything left to abuse or manipulate. I don't have a solid ending for this. I just wanted to say, fuck you, Ronnie. I wasted my youth being abused, and I won't stand for it anymore. This is my first and probably last post ever, but I need to get this off my chest. Only the people who were involved in court know about this, but most of them are already dead or sick. This is why I never talked about this with anyone since it happened 12 years ago. Before I start, I need to clarify some stuff. I am from Germany, so I'm sorry for any mistakes. The school system is like this. Elementary school is from 1st to 4th grade, followed by middle school and high school all together from 5th to 13th grade, and finally college or university. Since I got into middle school, I had a goal. I wanted to move to a foreign country and get a nice job there after studying something like business management. I set the bar very high because I grew up in a family of drug addicts, dealers, and abusive parents and brother. Because I had this goal, I always put pressure on myself unintentionally. I got to middle school by the age of 9, which was a year earlier than everyone. I got to school earlier since I could already read and write in kindergarten. By the age of 12, I had learned 3 new languages. English to an extent where I could easily talk to Americans and Brits. Japanese like a local elementary student, and Spanish, so I could also kinda talk to Spanish people. Fast forward to 13th grade. My life was hell throughout school, since I got beatings at home for not being able to sell and cook drugs and barely had any friends because of my clothes that always had holes in them. Even though I was close to suicidal, I never gave up on my goal and had only A's since 5th grade. I barely ever got B's. I had finished high school with a GPA of 4.0. Not sure if that's correct. I just know that I had the best possible GPA. I don't know how to convert a German GPA to an American GPA. I had finished university and studied business management. At this point, my parents had both died of a drug overdose, and the only person I pretty much knew was my brother, who was still an asshole. I never really talked to him. I just knew that he had done something with sports in his career. Everything went like I always dreamed except for the foreign country part. With 30, I had a wife and 2 kids, average income, and all in all an average life. I never was really happy with that because of the high expectations I had of myself. I tried to accept it, but I always felt like I threw my potential away. I fell into a deep depression when I was 33. My wife left me because of it and took the kids with her. And here I was again, alone, depressed, suicidal. The only person I knew and was comfortable with calling was my brother, who I hadn't seen for a few years. I thought he became a down-to-earth guy because on the phone he genuinely sounded like he was trying to help me. I was in debt, so I had to sell my car and take a train to the town where he lived. When I finally got there, he still seemed like he was trying to be helpful. He even offered me money, which I didn't want to accept. He took me into his place, which was surprisingly big. How did he get such a big house? He never did anything for school. He had always been an asshole, and all he did was think of sports and spend time with his friends doing drugs. I couldn't get that question out of my head, so I just had to ask him. The answer I got was, with hard work, of course. Hard work. He never did anything, and I knew he hadn't done anything since I had last seen him. To confirm this, I asked his wife, to which she said that he was just lucky. He had won the lottery. He won 2.7 million euros and did some lucky investments. A lazy, abusive piece of shit had more money and a better life than me. I couldn't get over this, but since he was being nice and let me stay at his place, I didn't mention it. After 3 months of staying at his place, he offered me a place in his company. I didn't know anything about his company and about this line of work. Keep in mind that I was still depressed and desperate. I accepted the offer, and he intentionally gave me a task in his company that was extremely hard to complete, and the other workers warned me. But I didn't listen. I had fucked up. I destroyed a machine that would cost around $150 to replace. I tried to explain to him that I couldn't give him the money because I was in department. He sued me and he won. My depression sucked me in a deep dark hole further and further. After a suicide attempt, I got sent to a mental health clinic, and I spent a little over a year there. I was 35 when I got out. My depression wasn't gone, but they decided that I wasn't trying to kill myself anymore. The first person I saw when I got out was my brother. He was waiting in the entrance area, and the first words he said to me were, "Can't get a decent job, can't get the wife to stay, and can't even kill yourself. What can you do?" I was furious. I couldn't hold back, and I punched him in the face as hard as I could and broke his jaw, and when he fell on the ground, he lost a tooth. Can you guess what happened again? Right, I got sued again. And he won again. I couldn't pay for the medical bills, so I got a loan. Everything seemed okay until I turned 38. I had paid off the loan but was still in department. I was relatively happy with life at this point until the day everything was ruined again. My brother decided to pay me a visit. He greeted me with the words, "You thought I would let you off with the medical bills. You probably knew, but everything I did for you was just a plan to make you kill yourself. You were the reason Mom and Dad died." Roughly. Of course, I can't remember his words exactly. XTUZME. I was the reason. They were drug addicts, and I didn't want to have anything to do with them. I said something like, "This will not end well if you don't leave me alone. You already ruined everything for me. Isn't that enough?" He told me that he would not leave me alone until I would kill myself. He brought my kids up again, and my wife and everything that had failed. I had lost it and started to beat him. I beat him for about 5 minutes when I realized that I had done something terrible. He was laying in a pool of blood, and I panicked. I called the cops on myself, and a few weeks later, the court decided what my punishment would be. Since I gave myself up to the cops, my time got reduced from original 13 years to 10. They knew that I was probably going to kill myself as soon as I got into prison. They put me in a cell that was supervised 24/7, so I couldn't even try. These 10 years opened my eyes. I had been a selfish asshole to my wife and kids, and always thought about my stupid career. I was the reason all of this had happened. I was the reason my wife left me, and my life seemed worthless. As soon as I got out, I started to search for a job. And even though I had been to prison, I found a job soon. It has now been 2 years since I got out, and I am the happiest I have ever been. I do not regret killing my brother one single bit. Not only did I help myself with it, but also his wife, who got his money, and everyone he had oppressed and assaulted over the past few years. His wife was happy he wasn't there anymore because he was beating her constantly. I have a below-average income, but a loving girlfriend who knows I was in prison but doesn't know the circumstances. I live in a small, cozy apartment, and I am happy to live my new life.
Next story.
This is a story a colleague told me a few days ago. He is an older fellow who is not shy and quite proud of his labor-intensive work background. My colleague was a seaman in his youth, working on ships from Oceania and Asia to South America, etc. He worked on several ships from different companies and countries, but after he married, he quit the sea and now works as a security guy in some lame office from 9 to 5. This event happened in the 80s. Edited. It was the 80s in Oceania, where he was working on a fishing ship with a crew of 35 to 45 seamen. About 15 of the seamen were from the same country as him and others from neighboring countries as well, but the bosses were from the parent company. Amongst all the bosses, the vice manager is the biggest prick. He has anger issues, repeatedly bullies workers, and even assaulted them from time to time. If a worker wasn't fast enough, he'd often hit them on the head with an iron tool. All of the workers did wear hard hats, but even so, it was also common for this vice manager to fight and smack workers who didn't dare to challenge him or even fight back. Again, The workers spoke different languages and were working in the middle of the sea, far from land. OP, my colleague who told me this story, VM, vice manager. After several months at sea, almost everybody on the ship has been harassed by VM, even OP, who is a quiet person who doesn't talk a lot. For some reason over the last week, however, VM kept messing with OP every chance he got. OP never complained when there was work to do and never failed to do it, which made him liked by the other managers. VM seemed to dislike that a low-level seaman was liked by the other managers and even the captain. During the harassment, VM kept complaining about OP's work, hitting him on head, cursing, spitting, and trying to start fights. He even accused OP of stealing some cigarettes and ship supplies. That, however, didn't get anywhere as the captain and other managers sided with OP. This harassment went on until OP finally got to the point where his blood was boiling, and he really wanted to smack VM without telling anybody. The revenge. One day, the ship got a big catch, so the whole crew worked hard and called it a day. These ships usually don't work the day after a big catch as their storage would be full, and everybody had worked hard the day before. Usually there'd also be a party on the ship. They'd gather in the common room, singing, eating, drinking, a lot of drinking. Till they drop. This is important later. VM got drunk and started harassing others and saying shit, screaming, etc. But with everybody being drunk, it was nothing weird. OP, however, seeing how drunk VM was getting, decides to hint obviously to VM that he needs to pee outside that night. So he tells everyone that he is going to the loo and heads out to the deck. VM obviously sees him and tries to follow him secretly to the deck, so nobody knows. OP knew that VM would follow him, but acted like he didn't know that he was followed, so VM would keep following him to the side of the ship on the back. When he got to the back rail, OP acted like he was peeing on the deck when suddenly VM attacked him from behind with an iron tool. OP saw the attack coming and fought back. Now they were both punching and hitting each other on the deck. One thing important to remember here is that OP didn't get drunk at the party like VM did. So, unlike VM, OP still had full use of his abilities, making the fight very one-sided. Greater than when OP had beaten VM halfway to the ground, he grabbed VM's shirt and trousers and threw him to the ocean in the middle of the cold night. OP spotted VM's shoes lying on the deck where they'd fallen off during the fight and quickly threw them to the ocean too. He returned to his room, panicking, shivering, and tried to sleep as the ship kept sailing that night. The next morning, the crew went back to work as normal and OP returned to his work as usual. By 10:00 a.m., one of the other managers is looking for VM but can't find him, so he reported him missing to the captain. No one could remember seeing him after the party, and he wasn't in any of the rooms, so the ship was brought to a stop, and the crew was instructed to search for him in every corner. OP even took part even though he knew he was never to be found. Everybody was questioned on his whereabouts except OP, as he was less likely to know or even have anything to do with him, especially as he was considered a quiet man. The captain also took into account that everybody was drunk that night, especially VM, as he was known to be a heavy drinker. So the captain assumed that VM might have fallen into the ocean that night on his own without anybody knowing. The crew continued their work that day, and the captain might have reported to shore about the missing VM, but that's it. Greater than ending. Without VM on board, working conditions were a lot better. No harassment, no bullying, nobody fighting, and all of the seamen were happy VM was no longer there.
Next story.
Cast. Christy. My best friend since junior high, like a sister to me, sweet loving soul, but has a tendency to be taken advantage of. Bruce. Christy's abusive boyfriend. John, Bruce's neighbor, and kinda Bruce's friend. Me. A sick vindictive fuck. So my best friend Christy started dating this guy Bruce a while back, maybe a year ago. I don't really know him, but I remember an encounter with him a few years back, sitting next to me in the bus, saying what a cunt Christy is. saying he knows her since elementary school, but that she went off to another middle school afterwards, the same one I went to. I barely knew the guy and told him to lay off, telling him she's my best friend, and I'm not gonna stand for it. Later I got off at my stop and thought that would be the end of that. Just some random jerk. Nope. Big nope. Couple years later, Christy starts hanging out with this friend, being very vague, saying I don't even know him and such. Finally, she gives in and tells me that she's been seeing this guy called Bruce Fakenhemmington. So I find him on Facebook, do a bit of detective work. He's a cook in a local restaurant, likes comics and airsoft, typical kid, nothing too sketchy about him. The first few weeks of Christy's relationship go fine, all lovey-dovey, nothing out of the ordinary. But then the complaints come rolling in. He's short-tempered, he's super jealous. He said if you try anything stupid with me, he'll kill you. All those were huge red flags, but I guess both of us ignored it all first. It being her first boyfriend, I didn't want to ruin it for her, but I was cautious. I started with a bit of a background check, talking to his friends and trying to get a non-biased opinion on him. At a party later, I talked to John, asking him where he knows Bruce from, since he lives quite far away. Turns out Bruce was John's brother's neighbor and that he spends his summers there. John told Bruce that he's going to party with me. Bruce retorts that he hates me and he'll kill me, and that I want to steal his girl. Uck mate, but I got better things to do than steal your girl. John also tells me some vital info, that he's probably the dumbest person alive, and he's thinking about moving to Quebec, but that he can't speak a word in French. He's in luck because I study French philology at uni. I'm starting to get fed up with Bruce's BS. Not only what I heard from John, but mostly the way he treats Christy. She deserves a proper boyfriend and should dump him. I call up Christy to go grab a beer and just chat. I use this time to try to talk some sense into her and tell her that if they are serious about moving to Quebec, that I could offer Bruce some French lessons so he at least knows the basics and offer him a truce, that I have no intentions of stealing his girl and so on. He accepts, and so begins my revenge plan. We meet up the next day in the cafe, and I try to teach this. I cannot stress this enough. Idiot some basic French. Now all of this is just a cover for me to gain his trust. This goes on for a few weeks, and then comes a lesson like any other. Except I arrive a bit early, and I'm messing around on my computer. Bruce comes and asks me what I'm doing. I'm working on a bootleg Instagram app that lets you download pictures. I show it to him on my phone, and he loves it and asks me for a copy. I tell him that I have a better, more stable version on my laptop, but that I have to compile it. Asterisk wink wink asterisk, what I'm actually doing is adding a RAT, remote access tool, with a keylogger and stuff to the app. He, none the wiser, installs the app, and we have our lesson. He thanks me for the app and leaves. When I get home, I check my computer, and I have everything on him. Call logs, passwords, location, and the list goes on. I snoop around for a while, check his social media and messages for dirt. I found the holy grail that would be the end of his toxic relationship with Christy. Turns out he was cheating on her, which explains his jealousy. I felt so sorry for Christy and so pissed at Bruce for doing this to her. I called up Christy and told her to come to the cafe alone. I tell her the truth, and she is totally devastated. Right there. And then she breaks up with Bruce. But that's not all. After Christy leaves, I decide to search his messages, including his messages with Christy, sorry Christy, and find a few dick pics and decide to have some fun. I send one to his boss, one to his mom, and one to one of his airsoft groups just for fun. I haven't seen him since he canceled the French lessons after the whole shitstorm. Good luck in life, buddy. Yours truly. Names: my father, Dad. Politician, Jack. Politician's brother-in-law, Bill. Bill's consultant, Dave. Dad's friend, Rob. Background: I live in an economically developing nation. used to be heavily dependent on agriculture produce for economic activity. My grandfather was a farmer, and he wanted his children to get educated and get a government job. So my dad got his master's from the only university we had in our region. Since most people study from the same university and get government jobs, so everyone in government offices knew one another in some way or the other. My dad was offered the position of officer in charge of our home state for the agriculture department and had around 40 people working under him. His task was to take care of agriculture and its related activities and acted as advisor to the local farming community via local newspapers. During the 1980s and early 1990s, our country had long droughts and famines. The then government decided to create 2 different government agencies to take care of food security. One agency will take care of buying and storing food grains, and another agency was tasked to enable building the infrastructure for food security. Dad was attached to the agency which was tasked with infrastructure. His agency's job was to give grants for anyone building infrastructure for food security. His duty was given the task of providing grants to anyone who was building warehouses for storing food. His job was to review the entire warehouse from planning to construction that can store food and provide 1/3 of project cost as a grant/subsidy to people who built it. This was the time when my country was doing all the stuff on paper, no computers, only typewriters, in government offices, and no cell phone. Your options were limited to a fixed telephone line and fax/copying machines, which were mind-blowing technology for my dad, were new to government offices. My dad used to do tons of paperwork in the office, reading through stuff, adding remarks, writing stuff. Add to that you had postal service that took somewhere between 7 till 10 days to have your mail delivered to the nearest town or city. Yeah, those were the times my dad lived. The story. In the late 1990s, my dad was doing his work at his office, when a commotion at the office entrance gets my dad's attention. He sees from the office window where 10 expensive cars are parked and a group of thugs holding the collar security personal, while warning them with long sticks and knives. My country didn't have armed security for government building back then. Security folks usually had small sticks. There were several unauthorized people were entering the building. You see, people were not allowed inside any government office unless they state the purpose to the officer in charge, and the officer permits the security to allow them. Suddenly, Bill and his men walk into my dad's office, pushing my dad's staff away. Bill introduces himself and mentions that he is the brother-in-law of Jack the senator from our region, and calls himself one of the powerful people in the region. He sits in my dad's chair and then drinks coffee and eats the cookies that were ordered for my dad, which was kept on his desk. Bill informs his men to go easy on my dad's staff as they start to drink coffee and eat cookies that were meant for the employees. Bill tells my dad that he was there to discuss availing the grant the government provides for a project that he was planning. My dad at times is submissive to people in the position of power, as he has seen consequences firsthand as some of his friends lost jobs or lives standing against powerful people. So Dad asks for the details of the project Bill was planning and asks him to send over the project proposal and an official request for the grant to him for reviewing, and informed Bill that the grant cannot be processed until the project is completed. Bill gets angry that any proposal for the project is enough to qualify for a grant and should be paid upfront for the project construction. My dad tells him how grant works and the project should be completed in order to qualify for the grant. Bill, pissed by this point, and yells at my dad and his office staff how government officials were educated morons are running the country into a grave. Bill takes all the necessary forms and applications from my dad and leaves the office furiously. Since no incidents happen and my dad didn't bother much about the incident, few weeks go by and my dad receives a huge set of documents via the postal service, and you might have guessed it. Those documents were related to Bill's project. Going through those documents, my dad identifies that they came from Dave, a consultant who was doing the work on behalf of Bill, and the documents further reveal that warehouse proposed in the region was big enough to hold enough food grains to feed a population equivalent for 2 states for an entire year. The proposed project would cost them $1.5 billion, and once completed it would cost the government $300 million in a grant. This was a huge amount for Dad to handle. Till that time, largest project he ever reviewed for providing government grant was $50K. That's total project cost, not the grant. Building such infrastructure would mean that any other warehouse existing / to be built in the region would be rendered useless. He quickly called his boss, asking him what he was supposed to do. His boss quickly looks at the rules and tells my dad that since there was no upper limit on the size of the warehouse or project cost, the only thing they could do was to review and process the application, and if everything checks out they might end up with $300 million in grant money. Since his boss upped processing of the application, my dad further reviewed the project proposal to identify that the warehouse was specifically designed for industrial use and not for storing food grains. Dad was confused, so he gives a call to Dave. Dave informs my dad that he was hired to plan for a warehouse for industrial, and there might have been some confusion over the details, and Dave promises that he would fix it and not reject the application based on those terms. Unsure of details, he decides to process the application and sends a note to Dave that the government would be reviewing the application, and once the project is completed, he should be informed about project completion, and my dad would visit the premises and give final approval after reviewing, and it would take another 3 to 6 months' time get grant money as a check from the government after the review process is done. 2 years go by. Dave comes to my dad's office in an expensive luxury SUV and dares the security personnel to stop him if they want to keep their job. Dave then rushes to my dad's cabin and asks my dad if he was available on that day to visit the premises and give final approval for the project. Unsure who Dave was and asks for clarification and why he would need to do approval today. Dad also informs Dave that there is a lot of documentation work that he needs to prepare before visiting the warehouse to give final approval. That would take at least 2 days for my dad. Dave tries to reason with my dad that he came from far-off city and he couldn't stay for long to get this completed. My dad again tells Dave that 2 days is the minimum it would take him to documentation ready. Dave, now angry, informs my dad that he represents Bill and Jack and the warehouse needs to be inspected today or lose his job. Dad was not buying it, told him again, 2 days or forget it. Dave leaves the office warning my dad that he will face consequences. Dad calls his boss informing him what had happened, and the boss tells my dad to take priority and inspect the warehouse at the earliest. 2 days later, my visits the warehouse, and to his surprise, he sees Dave on location. The first thing my dad noticed about the warehouse was it was not built for food grains or any agricultural produce for that matter. It was built for industrial purposes. Dave gives my dad a tour of the entire warehouse, explaining to him how state-of-the-art it was for the time. My dad takes note of every detail of the warehouse and informs Dave that the grant can't be approved due to fact that the warehouse was not constructed with storing agricultural produce in mind, and no one with a sound mind would overlook that fact to approve the grant. Dave starts yelling and excusing my father that he was looking for a bribe by withholding their grant, and my dad would approve the grant once he gets paid off. Bill and Jack are being targeted for making money off them. None of that was true about my dad. He was an honest man his entire life. My dad leaves the warehouse unsure of what he could get out of this situation. The next, my dad, who was super confused about why Bill has built an industrial warehouse in the middle of nowhere, and only the major activity in the region was farming. So he decides to call up Rob and asks him a few questions about how Rob's government agency, construction and building permits, has provided. Rob takes a couple of days to identify some horrific realities. First, the plans of the warehouse showcase and request permit to be an industrial complex for storing manufacturing goods. Bill bragged his way through Rob's agency and got environmental clearance and other permits without conforming to standards. He was also able to identify a report for building completion that was forwarded agency's requests for considering for storing food grains. Last but not least, he was able to find a construction tax bill submitted to the agency stating the construction cost of the warehouse is around $300 million, along with plans of creating an industrial zone for the region that was proposed to the Senate by Jack. This was news to my dad and Rob. They were shocked to know how Bill and Dave were able to inflate the cost of the warehouse, and they had plans to make the region a new industrial zone. My dad calls his boss and informs that Bill's project seems fishy, and he would reject the grant and forwarding him the documents once done. His boss tries to reason with him. It could be a career-ending move for both of them. Jack was trying to put pressure from the leader of the agency to have the grant approved. Rob decides to dig around to see if he can get any more information, and found the contract paper that was sent to the Food Procurement and Storing Agency, which raised several red flags. First, the contract stated an inflated rent for storing food grains, then rent will be reviewed on yearly basis based on market rate, and then the contract would make the agency pay for the next 15 years irrespective of whether the agency stores food or not. Rob calls my dad with this information. Now my dad, furious to know how Bill and Jack are planning to rob the government, decides to reject the grant for their project. A few days later, Bill turns up at my dad's office along with Dave in the same bashing manner he previously did, but now even more furious asks my dad why he is not approving the grant for his project and why it's taking so much time. Dad tries to calmly reason with him, stating it was not built as per norms, so he won't be able to approve. Bill turns red and fuming with anger. He can throw around as much money. My dad wanted to have his signature on the documents approving the grant. My dad refuses that it's a crime to bribe an officer. Bill goes on telling my dad that he lives in a mansion filled with escort girls and have as many as he likes. Dad refuses again. Bill now threatens my dad, saying he could get out of his job and replace someone else in the same position can do the job for him. Again, my dad firmly tells Bill that he can do whatever the hell he wants to do, but my dad would not approve the grant. This goes as a shouting match for around 3 hours in front of the entire office staff, but my dad didn't budge. Bill starts swearing to my father, telling him that he impotent to pass up an offer of having sex with the cheapest escort girls Bill has, which would cost my dad his entire year's salary to hire such an escort for a day. He also goes on yelling how my dad's parents might have abandoned him as a child who refuses to bring fortune to his family. My dad had enough of Bill by this point and asks Bill leaves his office. In the last attempt to threaten my dad, Bill asks his thugs to take care of him and leaves the office along with Dave. Bill's thugs threaten my dad at knife point, stating he needs to sign those papers, otherwise he would end up dead in a pile of rotten garbage. He also tells him that they wait for 1 month and expect those papers signed after that. Thugs then go on to ransack the entire office before leaving, and also threaten the staff to make sure his boss signed those damn papers approving the grant. My dad calls Rob and informs him what had happened and asks him fax all the documents collected so far were Bill's project, and he would be asking for those documents officially. Rob asks my dad what was his intention of using those documents and his plans were. My dad says I am going to take them down and I had enough from them. Rob tells my dad not to do anything crazy in the heat of the moment, but assured that he would send those details to my dad. The same day, Rob faxed my dad around 2,000 documents. My dad then calls up his boss to inform him that he would be going on a 10-day vacation. By the end of the day, my dad leaves the office with all documents related to Bill's project and fax documents from Rob, and head home. For the next 10 days, my dad sits at home going through every document, evidence he gathered with the help of Rob, and drafts his grant rejection letter with a lot of details, as didn't want to leave a chance anyone who can replace him or higher up above him, rejecting his comments on the project and approve the grant. After the vacation, goes back to the office, and the staff were surprised at him and were thinking that Bill's men abducted him, since he didn't inform anyone about his vacation plans. The same day, my dad asks his assistant to mail the documents to his boss as a confidential report. His assistant takes the documents and heads to the nearest postal office. At the same moment, Bill's men come to my dad's office to check with him if he had signed the documents or not, and he would be in serious trouble if is not done. My dad lies to them that he has approved the grant, and his assistant has just gone to mail those documents to his boss for processing, and would take up to 3 months for the grant to arrive. My dad also tells them to inform Bill that everything has been taken care of, and there is nothing worry about anymore, so that my dad won't be bothered by Bill or his men any further. A week later, my dad's boss furiously calls and asks my dad about the grant rejection letter he sent him and how crazy my dad was, which could end up having both of them killed. My dad assures his boss that he has taken care of everything, including Bill and Jack, and nothing to worry about, and he has to do was to hold on to those documents for a month or so. A month later, a local newspaper breaks a story of how Jack was corrupt to the hilt, and Bill was a partner in his crimes. The same morning, Bill is arrested from his mansion, half naked, and totally drunk along with a lot of escort girls. Bill was charged with corruption, bribery, sex racketeering, money laundering, and murder. Bill's men were also arrested for murder and were sentenced for life along with Bill. Jack was arrested for corruption, bribery, intimidation, and abuse of power. Jack made bail, but never won the election again, eventually retiring from politics. A decade later, Bill testified against Jack for the crimes they both committed, and Jack was sentenced to 15 years in jail. Dave was also charged with bribery, forgery, and money laundering. Dave fled the country to escape jail time. No one knows for sure where he is now. Police are still looking for him. No ever knew how did that happen to Bill and Jake except Rob and my dad. The revenge. You see, my dad took 10 days vacation, not just to hide from Bill's men, but he was planning to execute his perfect plan for revenge against Bill. He systematically documented every ounce of evidence he had and drafted a comprehensive report against Bill and Jack on how they planned to cheat the government and have the government cough up the money for nothing. Remember when he asked his assistant to mail the documents to his boss? He actually had mailed 4 copies of those documents. One for his boss for rejection of grant. The second one was to the agency that was planning to store good grain in Bill's warehouse, proposing to blacklist his property for non-compliance with standards. The third and fourth mails were sent as an anonymous tip to a federal agency equivalent of FBI. Let's call it XBI. And to an investigative journalist from a local newspaper. XBI was also informed that a copy was sent to the local newspaper. XBI and the investigative journalist did their own investigation and found that the money put into the warehouse project was Jack's entire stash of money, what he got through bribes, commissions, and favors for doing things while he was in power. This money was laundered by Bill through a network of entities to find the warehouse project and cook the books to inflate the project cost, get his money back from the government as a grant in legal form. The journalist also uncovered some government officials were murdered by Bill and his men for not doing Bill asked them to do, and handed the evidence over to XBI. It took them a month to investigate and identify all the pieces of the puzzle to nab Bill and Jack. Neither XBI nor the journalist was able to find out who sent those documents to them. My dad's boss took early retirement, and Dad became the director of the agency he worked for a few years later, and eventually retiring 15 years after this incident. Rob retired a year later and narrated this entire story to our family at his retirement party. I still see the abandoned warehouse whenever I travel to my hometown from the city where I work. First of all, the story is a bit older, but I will keep stuff rather ambiguous at times just for my own safety. I don't know how much my company can find out. I hope I can put it into words so everyone understands, especially as English is not my first language. Also, there will be a TLDR at the bottom. Also, there are some Google translations in this, so please be merciful. So, let's get started. I started working in logistics at a company that builds things. That was just as COVID was starting, actually. When I started, we were 5 people in the team, but one of the guys quit soon after. This is important because it was a very good insight into how my department operates when they don't need or want a certain someone around. They will not outright fire you, since then they have to pay you a severance. But instead, they will bully you into quitting. I saw pretty much the whole package, excluding them from meetings and important events, putting them down in public, lecturing them, never noticing good work done, but always making sure everyone knows about work that is poorly done, drowning someone in work, and then berating them when they inevitably can't keep up. It was outright childish at times. I didn't register it at the time, but it was a really valuable lesson for later. I was put in charge of managing our overseas suppliers, among other things. About half of our material came from overseas, most of that from China. While it seems like a big task for someone new, it wasn't done out of malice. Genuinely, everyone believed we were going to get a guy in China for the Chinese supplies, then I'd be left for the handful of others. It seemed fair. But we never got that guy for China, and I was left with all overseas suppliers. Another important thing is that just in this project, the company had decided to change the workflow for overseas suppliers. This is because due to COVID, the price of shipping containers had exploded. To explain it as simply as possible, previously the suppliers were responsible for filling our containers and bringing them to the harbor. We were responsible for picking them up from the harbor and bringing them to us. However, due to demands and many other things, sometimes we just needed 2 or 3 pallets of parts, where a dozen or more could fit inside a container. So we were shipping a lot of air. The new workflow would have the suppliers bring the parts to an external warehouse, one in the US, one in China. Then we would load them into containers to get the containers as full as possible, and then bring them to the harbor and then into our plant. This way we needed to rent far fewer containers. This complicated things because it erased the direct contact from us to the suppliers, and there was no official method how we were going to keep in contact with suppliers. Tell them how many parts we need, how to package them, if there were any changes requested, etc. During that time, I was left mostly alone to deal with it, and I set up a system with Excel. It was mostly manual, rather simple, but it worked well. It worked so well that one of the suits even chatted with me about it for a bit since he wanted to make it a standard in future projects. And also, this is very important, I was the only person who actually knew all our overseas suppliers and their contacts. Some of you might be able to tell where this story is going already. So during that entire time, nobody had actually bothered to ask me to explain to them how my system worked and where I kept track of all the supplier contacts. All of this data was hidden on like slide 800 of some Excel file I had saved in a folder titled Part Pictures, which was otherwise filled with pictures of parts. Now moving forward. As COVID began dying down, the department for whatever reason decided they don't need me anymore. I have theories but nothing certain, so I will just leave it at that. I pretty much saw precisely the same thing go down as I had seen with that one guy who had left shortly after I started. All the bullying. I thought to myself at first that if I pull through and keep doing a good job, and I believe I did a good job, they would eventually cool down. But they didn't. After 2 months of that, I said fuck it, and decided to just sit out and endure until the Christmas bonus we get every year, and then hand in my notice. And also, I just delayed teaching anyone how my system worked until I was gone. And that is pretty much how it happened. Off topic. For my own future employment, I actually lucked out. One of the local suppliers I was managing had a really chill guy as managing director. I gave him a call, explained I was about to be unemployed, asked if they needed staff. He then called me in to an interview. We talked about anime for an hour while his HR lady looked confused about what a Attack on Titan was, and he told me I can come in the moment I am done with my, then, current job. Back on topic, a month into working at my new job, I got a call from my old job, the department manager. To his credit, he was always a reasonable guy. He told me in plain words that they have no idea where TF to even start with the Chinese suppliers. He then offered me my old job back with a very respectable pay increase. I explained that I already had a new job. 2 days later, I got another call where the same manager offered me many times my monthly salary just to come in for 1 week and instruct my old team in how my process functioned, introduce them to all the contacts, etc. I told him I refused because of the way I had been treated by them when I worked there. He said that he understood and wished me luck at my new job, and hung up. The reason I am writing this story now: this week I randomly got in touch with some of the people in the transport department from my old job. They mentioned that in the now 10 months since I left, the logistics department racked up 8-figure losses due to wrong deliveries, over and under deliveries, outdated parts, some suppliers canceling their contracts and new suppliers needing to be sourced, etc. And all the blame for that fell on my old team. My new job is fine. It's not the best job, but I get to travel a lot and get nice bonuses for it. My boss isn't around much since he married. I do sometimes regret not taking that offer for a week as an instructor.
Next story.
When I was younger, especially throughout middle school, I dealt with bullying and toxicity constantly. I've never been much of a Reddit user, but I decided to post my story after watching some of these on YouTube. This situation happened when I was in 7th grade. During that time, I was progressively bullied by a group of kids I will call the Goonies. I'm not a small person, and I never have been around that time. I was around 5'11", 150 pounds. Although I'm big for my age, I've never been one to fight back. I have impulse control issues and ads, so when I get worked up, I have a hard time calming down, or I got overboard. Even so, I can mostly hold back my emotions when on medication. The Goonies, the group of kids who constantly made my life hard throughout my school experience. The group comprised of 5 to 6 kids, mostly small, and on the football team, but due to their numbers they had an advantage over most people in my school. They preyed consistent on people who were without a group. Most of the time they just took food items during lunch and asked for money from others. On the bad days they would fight others and take whatever they wanted. They had been preying on me and my group of friends for a while, mostly talking shit and taking food. This time was different though. I had worn my grandfather's chain and crossed a school I had gotten as inheritance when he passed the week before. When I tell you it meant a lot to me, it did. My grandfather was my pride and joy. We had the best relationship as my father was mostly out of town working. He has never been in the best health, but he got lung cancer a few months before and passed on. The chain was all I really had besides some model train sets and a ukulele. That day I wore my chain to remove some of the grief I was feeling from his passing to make it through the day. My friends knew about the passing and were trying to comfort me throughout the day. But the one class I don't have with them was gym, and in our school we are required to remove jewelry before class. That part was uneventful. The problem was when I went back into the locker room. All of the goons had gym the period after, and I would see them as I was in the locker room. As I walked in and took my chain out of my locker, one of them took notice and immediately asked what I had in my hand. I, of course, wanting not to cause problems, said nothing important. I went to the bathroom to put it on, and when I walked out, all of them were waiting for me. They started to tell me to give them what was around my neck. In the moment, I was on the verge of tears because I didn't want to lose one of the only things I had left to remember my grandfather. So I made a run for it. They blocked a door and started punching and kicking me. I didn't want to cause a fight because I knew it would get out of hand, and I up until then had a perfect school record. When they stopped, I sat up and started to try and leave. The main Goonie, the leader of the pack, grabbed the chain and ripped it of me, breaking it and mangling the cross that my grandfather took such pride in. He started laughing as I stared at him in pure disbelief. I saw a red. I lost it and started pummeling the main kid, grabbing him by his collar and smashing his head over and over again into the concrete, while his friends watched, screaming to stop trying to pry me away. The gym teacher heard all of the commotion. I don't know how he didn't hear me getting jumped before, and came in running, yanking me away from main goon and locking me in his office. He called the nurse and an ambulance. He was freaking out. I got suspended for 3 months only due to cameras in the hall that could see into the window of the door. It witnessed them jumping me. The only reason I didn't get arrested was that Kamara thanked God for technology. This might not seem like nuclear revenge yet, but here's the list you are waiting for. Injuries: fractured skull, broken nose, broken jaw, 8 lost teeth, and severe brain damage. He was out for 4 months with some time in the hospital. He didn't make it back onto the football team due to the fear his head would get hit. His grades also took a hit, and he had to repeat 2 years. My group, on the other hand, have been free from bullying ever since.
Next story.
But first, let's meet the cast. There's me, best friend, and of course the star of the show, Scumbag. First, a little bit of background. There was this homeless. He wasn't truly homeless. Scumbag, who I was sheltering in my house while he looked for a place to stay. I wanted to help him out and help him back on his feet. He had been problematic for a while. He was crapping in the trash can, pissing in soda bottles everywhere, and lying to everyone all the time. He wasn't even good at lying. He was one of those pathological liars who can't tell the truth to save their life. And when he got a BB gun, he shot out my neighbor's window. This will become relevant at the end. The list of sketchy stuff Scumbag did could go on for days, but that's not what I'm writing this about. Though it certainly does factor into the revenge. Now on to the main event. While one of my buddies needed a ride to the train station, and I was too tired to drive, so I let him take my car and drive him to the train station. When he came back, my front bumper was on the ground, and he duct taped it back on. He claimed that he was T-boned at an intersection and injured his leg. He went to the hospital, faked his injury, and came back with crutches, so I buy it. When I asked the police in the town he said it happened in, whom he said he had filed a report with, they told me no such event had been reported, and they had no clue what I was talking about. I later found out through my buddy who was in the car with him that he was doing donuts in a parking lot and hit a tree. So shame on me for letting someone drive my car, I know. It was a very stupid decision on my part. The cost of repairing my car came out to be $2,000, and I couldn't get insurance to cover it, so the repairs came out of my pocket. So I gave him the benefit of the opportunity to make things right and said, all right, pay for the cost of repairs, and I'll forgive the transgression. He already had a minimum wage job, so I expected him to pay me every week until it was paid off. After 2 weeks he stopped, so I took his £3 and safe as collateral and said I'd give it back when he paid me back, and if he didn't I'd sell it to cover the costs. A few weeks later, my best friend who was also staying with me had his wisdom teeth removed. He was in a ton of pain. That dental pain is the worst. Scumbag said he needed to go to the store. He let Scumbag take the bike to the grocery store, but after a while we became suspicious. He called saying the bike wouldn't start. I drove over to the store he said he was at, and he and the motorcycle were nowhere to be found. The store was 10 minutes away. We called him and said bring it back now or else we'll report it stolen. When he came back later that evening with a girl, and he made up a BS excuse as to why the motorcycle had 130 miles on the odometer. The way he told it made it clear he had no clue how mechanical odometers work. They don't glitch and jump ahead 130 miles like said it did. My best friend would note he's constantly pulling his bike apart and making repairs and modifications to it. I grilled him about the fact that he was never where he said he was. We deduced that he had rode the bike to his hometown to pick up his girlfriend and back and lied about everything. That was the last straw that broke the camel's back, and a very bad mistake. My best friend and I were trembling with rage when he threw him and his girl out the front door to the curb. This is where the nuclear revenge begins. Scumbag was dumb enough to leave all of his passwords saved on the laptop we loaned him while he was with us. We got his email and changed the password. Once you've got someone's email, you've got everything else by default. We got his social media accounts and financial accounts and reset their passwords too. It was HeyWoyisTRI-TAL seeing the flurry of password reset emails coming in. He knew we had him in the bag and was frantically trying to salvage his situation. He had opened a bank account at the local bank to deposit his paychecks from his local cashier job while he was in the area. We emptied the whole thing for a total of $2,500. Imagine my shock. I kept the $2,000 for my car and gave the remaining $500 to best friend for his troubles and having my back. We then sold his 3 pounds on Craigslist and split that 50/50ths. We eventually opened his safe, and it was full of random papers and earbuds of no value. But it did have his debit card, and one of the papers had his PIN on it, which is how we emptied his bank account. In addition to that, while he's on the way out, I go to the store he was working at and tell his boss he won't be showing up this afternoon and to consider him to be quit. I explained why. The manager was cool about it, but told me he can't take my word for it. In any event, he was never seen at that establishment again. So sooner or later that manager was going to have to take my word for it. But we're not done yet. We still have a social life to destroy. We hijack his Facebook and make all of his friends hate him. We make posts about the shitty stuff he did. We make posts about eating his poop. We make posts exclaiming his love of all manner of debauchery and degeneracy. We start petty fights with his friends list in the DMs. We go onto their walls and say snarky, nasty shit. We turned EVERY against him, and in the process of destroying his social life, a bunch of girls he abused and who lurked on his page came out of the word work praising us for taking him down a peg. It's been years, and he still doesn't have a social media presence. A few weeks go by, and we get a package in the mail from him. Turns out he wasn't homeless and completely out of options like he said. Big surprise, I know. The package was mailed from his parents' house. It's an empty threat to sue me overflowing with hilariously made-up lies and pages of screenshots of what we did to his social media. Me and best friend are laughing our asses off reading it. He said he left town because the bills were too much. He never did sue us, and we even taunted his bluff with our new Facebook account. The reason why he thought this would fly is the neighbor threatened to sue us over the window he broke, and we paid for the replacement window. So he thought that the mere threat of a lawsuit would be enough to put an end to the revenge. I still have his lawsuit letter because I like to read it for a good chuckle every now and then. I'm thinking of framing it on my wall as a trophy. Last I heard, he's completely destitute and has 0 friends now that everyone knows how much of a terrible person he is. Even his parents got sick of his manipulative behavior. His girlfriend didn't take long to wise up and apologize to us. So what's the real lesson of the story? Protect the ever-loving crap out of your email, because that's all anyone needs to gain access to everything else you do and completely ruin you. Also, don't save your passwords on the computers of the people you're screwing over.